Chapter 1, The Last Offer. The Galactic Council Nexus hung above Helios Prime like a second moon, a colossal ring of silver and gold stretching thousands of kilometers across space. From a distance, it looked peaceful. Up close, it was the center of power for nearly half the known galaxy. Today, every corridor buzzed with anticipation. Delegates from hundreds of civilizations filled the station. News drones drifted through the air. Reporters broadcast in dozens of languages. Massive screens displayed a single message. Final Human Accession Summit. After decades of negotiations, the galaxy expected history to be made. Humanity, the last major independent civilization, was finally supposed to join the Galactic Council. At least, that was what everyone believed. Ambassador Elias Kane stepped from the shuttle onto the Nexus arrival platform. He moved with measured confidence, ignoring the swarm of cameras aimed at him. At 57, streaks of gray lined his dark hair, but his sharp eyes missed little. Questions flew from every direction. Ambassador Kane, will humanity sign today? Is Earth ready to become a council member? What message do you have for the galaxy? Kane offered a polite smile but continued walking. No statement before negotiations begin. The crowd groaned in disappointment. Beside him, his aide, Lieutenant Mara Chen, glanced at her datapad. The media already assumes we've agreed. That's their mistake, Kane replied. Ahead, towering glass doors opened into the Grand Assembly Chamber. The sight never failed to impress. Rows of floating platforms rose in concentric circles around a vast central floor. Representatives of countless species occupied their assigned positions. Some stood upright. Others floated in nutrient tanks or sat inside environmental chambers designed for exotic atmospheres. At the highest platform sat the most powerful figure in known space. High Chancellor Vale Threx. Even seated, the Chancellor commanded attention. His silver robes shimmered beneath the chamber lights. Age had softened none of his presence. As Kane approached, Threx rose. The chamber fell silent. Delegates, the Chancellor announced, his voice echoing throughout the hall, today marks a milestone for civilization itself. Polite applause followed. For centuries, humanity has contributed innovation, exploration, and courage to our shared galaxy. We gather now to welcome them into our great union. The applause grew louder. Kane noticed something interesting. Not every delegate was clapping. A few remained motionless. Watching. Waiting. Threx extended a hand toward the human delegation. Ambassador Kane, humanity's future awaits. Kane stepped forward. We are honored by the invitation, Chancellor. A diplomatic answer. Nothing more. The formal proceedings began. Hours passed as council officials outlined membership benefits. Expanded trade. Shared security. Access to strategic resources. Joint scientific initiatives. Everything sounded reasonable. Almost too reasonable. Finally, a data crystal arrived at Kane's station. The complete membership agreement. His eyes scanned the document. The first pages contained expected provisions. The next pages did not. His expression hardened. Military deployment authorization required council review. Colonial defense initiatives required council coordination. Advanced technological development required oversight committees. Resource management standards required external compliance. The deeper he read, the worse it became. Humanity would retain its flag. Its government. Its identity. But key decisions would no longer belong solely to humans. The arrangement had been packaged as cooperation. In reality, authority flowed in only one direction. Kane slowly looked up. Chancellor. Threx smiled. Yes, Ambassador. When were these conditions added? A faint ripple moved through the chamber. The terms have evolved during negotiations. Evolved? Kane asked. The language is standard among member states. Kane held up the crystal. Military oversight is standard. Collective security requires coordination. Technology restrictions. Responsible innovation benefits everyone. Resource controls. Shared prosperity demands shared responsibility. Kane's gaze never left him. Partnership does not require obedience. Several delegates shifted uneasily. Threx remained calm. Every member accepts these responsibilities. Responsibilities are not the issue. Kane placed the crystal on the table. Control is. Silence settled over the chamber. For the first time, the smiling confidence around the room seemed less certain. The Chancellor folded his hands. Humanity seeks cooperation, does it not? We do. Then where is the problem? The problem, Kane replied, is that cooperation ends when one side loses the ability to choose. The statement landed harder than he intended. Whispers spread among the delegates. Threx's expression remained unchanged, but his eyes narrowed slightly. The Council has preserved peace for centuries. And yet peace alone is not freedom. The room grew still again. Before the discussion could escalate further, procedural officials intervened and suspended the session until the following day. Delegates began leaving. Conversations erupted across the chamber. Kane gathered his materials and headed toward the exit. As he passed through a quieter corridor, he noticed an elderly alien seated alone beside a viewing window. The delegate species was unfamiliar even to him. The old figure watched the stars rather than the crowd. Without turning, he spoke. Ambassador Kane. Kane stopped. Yes. The delegate finally looked at him. Tired eyes met his. Eyes carrying the weight of centuries. Before you sign anything, study the archives. Kane frowned. Why? A faint smile crossed the old delegate's face. Because every civilization believes it is joining the Council. The smile vanished. Few ask what happened after. The delegate stood and walked away before Kane could respond. For several moments, Kane remained motionless. Then he activated his communicator. Mara. Her voice answered instantly. Sir. I want full archive access requests filed immediately. Looking for something specific? Kane glanced toward the distant assembly chamber. Not yet. Beyond the glass, Helios Prime burned against the darkness. For the first time since arriving, he felt certain of one thing. Something was hidden beneath the Council's polished promises. And he intended to find it. Chapter 2, The Truth Buried in the Archives. The Galactic Council Nexus never slept. While delegates attended banquets and diplomatic receptions, Ambassador Elias Kane sat inside a secure archive chamber buried deep beneath the station's administrative sectors. The room was silent except for the faint hum of data processors examining centuries of records. Lieutenant Mara Chen stood beside a holographic display filled with historical files. You need to see this, she said. Kane looked up. For 6 hours they had reviewed treaty documents, membership agreements, economic reports, and legislative records from civilizations that had joined the Council. Most appeared ordinary at first glance. The deeper they dug, the less ordinary they became. Mara expanded a file. The Ketheri Empire. A vast star map appeared. 700 years earlier, the Ketheri had ruled thousands of systems. Wealthiest civilization of their era, Mara explained. Kane studied the timeline. The Empire joined the Council. 10 years later, military decisions required Council approval. 30 years later, trade policy shifted to Council committees. 70 years later, key infrastructure fell under shared administration. After 2 centuries, the Ketheri government still existed. On paper. Actual authority had migrated elsewhere. What happened afterward? Kane asked. Mara opened another record. The empire dissolved. No war. No rebellion. Kane frowned. They simply disappeared. Legally. The word lingered in the air. A civilization had not been conquered. It had been absorbed. Kane leaned back. Show me another. A second file appeared. The Varn Collective. Unlike the Ketheri, the Varn had dominated scientific research. Their technology surpassed most neighboring powers. Then came council membership. Joint innovation agreements followed. Technology sharing initiatives followed those. Within decades, their exclusive advantages vanished. Competing worlds gained access to Varn breakthroughs while restrictions limited independent development. Economic influence collapsed. Eventually the collective became one member among hundreds. Nothing illegal. Nothing dramatic. Yet the outcome looked strangely familiar. The pattern repeated. Again. And again. And again. Different species. Different cultures. Identical destination. Mara crossed her arms. It's like watching the same story told 100 times. Kane stared at the floating records. Every civilization enters as a partner. And leaves as a dependent. Before Mara could answer, a secure communication alert flashed across the display. Unknown source. Both exchanged cautious glances. Trace it, Kane said. Mara attempted a scan. No origin point. The transmission activated. An elderly alien appeared. Gray skin. Sharp features. Ancient eyes. Kane immediately recognized him. The delegate from the corridor. The one who had warned him. You found enough to ask questions, the stranger said. Who are you? Kane replied. A historian. Name. Names become unimportant after 2 centuries. That was not an answer. The old alien seemed unsurprised by Kane's skepticism. You seek proof that the council changes those who join it. I seek facts. Good. The historian transferred encrypted files into the archive system. New records appeared instantly. Many carried restricted classifications. Some had been sealed for centuries. Mara's eyes widened. These aren't public. They were once. The historian's expression darkened. Before they became inconvenient. Kane opened one file. Meeting transcripts. Private communications. Internal memorandums. The language was revealing. Council officials repeatedly discussed integration progression. Another document referenced reducing member state independence over time. A third outlined strategies for expanding central authority without provoking resistance. Kane read in silence. Finally he looked up. Why show me this? The historian hesitated. Then answered honestly. Because humanity still has a choice. The room grew quiet. The rest didn't. Most never saw the process until it was complete. Kane studied him carefully. Why does humanity matter so much? For the first time, the old alien smiled. Because you're succeeding. What does that mean? You expanded across hundreds of worlds without council supervision. Your economy rivals member coalitions. Your military protects your territory independently. His voice lowered. You are proof that the council is not necessary. The implication landed heavily. If humanity remained independent, other species might begin asking uncomfortable questions. Questions powerful institutions rarely welcomed. Mara glanced at another document. Look at this. She enlarged a recent internal briefing. Humanity's name appeared repeatedly. Strategic concern. Political influence risk. Independent governance model. Kane's jaw tightened. We're not being recruited. The historian nodded. You're being neutralized. Silence followed. Then warning alarms suddenly flashed across the archive terminal. Access revoked. Restricted material detected. Security notified. The historian looked unsurprised. They found us. His image began fading. Wait, Kane said. Who are you really? The old alien offered one final answer. A citizen of a civilization that no longer governs itself. Then the transmission vanished. Moments later, the archive system locked down completely. Every restricted file disappeared. Every access route closed. Mara exhaled slowly. Well. That's not suspicious at all. Kane almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he stared at the blank display. The evidence was gone. The knowledge remained. Hours later, aboard the human diplomatic vessel, a secure conference connected him with leaders on Earth. Faces filled the screen. Politicians. Military commanders. Economic advisors. Opinions arrived immediately. We can't risk isolation. The Council controls major trade routes. Membership guarantees stability. Others disagreed. If we surrender authority now, we'll never recover it. Future generations inherit whatever we sign. The debate lasted for hours. No consensus emerged. When the meeting ended, Kane remained alone in the conference room. Outside the viewport, Helios Prime burned like molten gold. His communicator chimed. An official council message appeared. The text contained only one sentence. Final decision required. 48 hours remaining. Kane read it twice. Not a request. Not an invitation. A deadline. He closed the message and looked toward the distant lights of the Nexus. The council wanted an answer. Soon they would receive one. But it would not be the answer they expected. Chapter 3, The Ultimatum. The countdown had become impossible to ignore. Every screen aboard the human diplomatic vessel displayed the same figure. 41 hours remaining. The number seemed to follow Ambassador Elias Kane wherever he went. It appeared in news broadcasts, official notifications, and council updates. The message behind it was clear. Choose. Submit. Or face the consequences. Outside the vessel's observation deck, hundreds of ships orbited the Galactic Council Nexus. Traffic moved normally, yet tension had settled over the station like an approaching storm. Kane stood silently, studying the stars. The door opened behind him. Lieutenant Marachin entered carrying a data tablet. You should see this. Kane turned. More pressure. More than yesterday. She handed him the tablet. Council-controlled media networks were already preparing narratives. Some analysts described humanity as stubborn. Others called them reckless. One commentator openly questioned whether independent powers should be allowed to exist at all. Kane returned the tablet. They're shaping public opinion before we've even answered. They expect resistance. Then they're worried. Mara nodded. That possibility had occurred to her as well. Hours later, the Grand Assembly chamber filled for an emergency session. Delegates occupied every platform. Journalists crowded observation galleries. The atmosphere felt less like diplomacy and more like a trial. At the center stood Chancellor Vale Threx. When he began speaking, the chamber immediately quieted. Representatives of the galaxy, he announced, we gather to resolve a matter affecting all civilized worlds. His gaze settled briefly on Kane. Humanity has benefited from council trade routes, security cooperation, and economic access while remaining outside our collective framework. A large display activated behind him. Statistics appeared. Shipping networks. Commercial exchanges. Defense partnerships. Threx gestured toward the figures. The galaxy thrives through unity. Polite applause followed. Yet unity requires commitment. His voice hardened slightly. Therefore, the Council hereby issues its final offer. Humanity will have 48 hours to accept membership terms. Failure to do so will result in suspension of privileged trade access, diplomatic limitations, and exclusion from strategic transportation networks. A murmur swept across the chamber. Even delegates who supported the Council seemed surprised by the severity. Kane remained expressionless. Threx continued. Order cannot survive when major powers refuse shared responsibility. One delegate rose. A blue-skinned representative from the Asaran Confederacy. Is this truly necessary, Chancellor? The question drew immediate attention. Threx answered calmly. It is regrettable. Kane noticed something. The Chancellor never said it was necessary. Only regrettable. The distinction mattered. When the session ended, delegates broke into dozens of private discussions. Many approached the human delegation. Some offered support. Others warned of disaster. Most simply wanted to know what humanity would do. The truth was that humanity itself had not fully decided. Back aboard the vessel, a secure strategy meeting stretched deep into the night. Military officers appeared through holographic links. Economic analysts joined from Earth. Colonial governors connected from distant systems. Arguments erupted almost immediately. We cannot afford isolation. Our trade volume drops by 30%. Entire industries depend on Council markets. A fleet admiral countered. And what happens when Council approval becomes necessary for military deployment? Another voice joined. What happens when future generations inherit regulations they never voted for? The discussion continued for hours. Neither side lacked valid concerns. Joining offered stability. Refusing protected independence. The choice was brutal because both paths carried risk. Eventually the room emptied. Only Kane remained. Exhaustion weighed on him, but sleep felt impossible. His communicator suddenly flashed. Unknown channel. Again. He accepted. The elderly historian appeared. His face looked older than before. Perhaps because time was running out. You found what you needed, the historian asked. Enough to understand the pattern. Then you still lack the final piece. The old alien transferred another encrypted file. Kane opened it immediately. His pulse quickened. These were not historical records. They were current internal communications. Council leadership discussions. Strategic planning documents. Long-term governance projections. One phrase appeared repeatedly. Incremental Centralization Initiative. Another document outlined future authority expansions. Additional oversight. Broader regulatory powers. Reduced autonomy among member governments. Everything happened gradually. Over decades. Sometimes centuries. The goal was obvious. A single governing structure directing the entire galaxy. Kane looked back at the historian. How many delegates know this exists? Very few. Does Threx? The old alien laughed softly. Threx helped write it. Silence followed. At last, the final uncertainty disappeared. This was no misunderstanding. No bureaucratic accident. No difference in political philosophy. It was intentional. The historian studied him carefully. What will humanity choose? Kane stared through the viewport toward the distant lights of the Nexus. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he answered. Freedom. The historian smiled. The expression carried sadness and admiration at the same time. Then prepare yourself. For what? The galaxy has forgotten what it looks like when someone says no. The transmission ended. Kane remained alone. Minutes later, he activated a private recording. The message would be transmitted to Earth if negotiations collapsed. He looked directly into the camera. History teaches a simple lesson. Rights surrendered for convenience are rarely returned. He paused. Whatever happens tomorrow, humanity must remember who it is. The recording ended. Outside, the stars remained unchanged. Inside the Nexus, politicians, journalists, and governments waited for an answer. The following morning, Kane walked toward the Grand Assembly chamber. Thousands of eyes followed him. The final session was about to begin. And for the first time, he knew exactly what he was going to say. Chapter 4, Humanity Walks Away. The Grand Assembly chamber had never been so crowded. Every diplomatic platform was occupied. Observation galleries overflowed with journalists. Across the galaxy, trillions watched through live broadcasts. Entire worlds paused their daily routines to witness humanity's decision. The atmosphere felt electric. At the center of the chamber stood High Chancellor Vale Threx. Confident. Composed. Certain of victory. He stepped forward as the session began. Representatives of the galaxy, he announced, his voice carrying throughout the immense hall, today we conclude a process decades in the making. Large displays illuminated behind him. Images of prosperous member worlds appeared. Thriving cities. Trade networks. Scientific achievements. Examples of Council success. The Council was founded to replace conflict with cooperation, Threx continued. Together, we have built an era of stability unmatched in recorded history. Applause echoed from many sections. Then the Chancellor turned toward the human delegation. Ambassador Kane. Silence spread instantly. The Council awaits humanity's answer. Every camera focused on him. Every eye followed him. Elias Kane rose from his seat. Slowly. Deliberately. He walked toward the central platform. No notes. No prepared display. At least, that was what everyone thought. When he reached the center, he activated a data crystal. Thousands of screens across the chamber changed simultaneously. The first document appeared. Then another. Then another. Private Council memorandums. Internal strategic plans. Restricted communications. A ripple of confusion swept through the audience. Threx frowned. What is this? Kane looked directly at him. Context. More files appeared. Timelines emerged beside them. Historical comparisons. Records of civilizations before and after membership. The Ketheri Empire. The Varn Collective. Dozens more. Gasps spread through the chamber as delegates reviewed the evidence. Political authority reduced. Independent institutions absorbed. Local governance steadily transferred to council oversight. Nothing dramatic. Nothing sudden. Just gradual consolidation. 1 century at a time. Voices erupted throughout the hall. Delegates began speaking over one another. Questions flew in every direction. Several demanded explanations. Others demanded verification. For the first time since arriving at the Nexus, Kane saw uncertainty on Threx's face. The Chancellor stepped forward. These records lack proper interpretation. Kane answered immediately. Then provide one. The challenge landed hard. Threx's expression tightened. The Council coordinates member governments for collective prosperity. By reducing their ability to govern themselves. By ensuring consistency. By concentrating authority. The chamber grew louder. Debate spread across dozens of platforms. Some delegates defended the Council. Others appeared shocked by information they had never seen before. Threx raised his voice. You present cooperation as oppression. Kane remained calm. No. I present facts. A tense silence followed. Then the Chancellor made one final attempt. Without unity, the galaxy fractures. The statement echoed through the chamber. For years it had served as the foundation of Council policy. Kane met his gaze. Unity built upon submission is not unity. The room fell still. Frex stepped closer. Would humanity rather stand alone? Kane shook his head. No. The answer surprised everyone. He turned toward the delegates instead. We seek trade. He looked toward another platform. We seek friendship. Then another. We seek alliances. His voice strengthened. But partnership is not ownership. No one interrupted. No one moved. Kane continued. Humanity crossed the stars because we believed every generation deserved the right to choose its own future. The chamber listened. We respect every civilization here. We welcome cooperation with all of them. His gaze swept across the assembly. But no government, council, committee, or institution will make humanity's choices for humanity. The words carried through the hall. Simple. Direct. Impossible to misunderstand. Kane drew a slow breath. Then delivered the sentence that would be remembered for centuries. The United Human Systems hereby terminates all membership negotiations with the Galactic Council. Silence. Absolute silence. Even the journalists forgot to speak. Then Kane added one final word. Permanently. The chamber erupted. Delegates stood. Arguments exploded. Questions flooded every communication network. Market analysts issued emergency reports. News organizations interrupted scheduled programming. Across the galaxy, citizens watched history change in real time. Frex remained frozen. Not because humanity had refused. Because humanity had walked away entirely. Hours later, broadcasts dominated every world. The story spread faster than any military fleet. Within weeks, member species began demanding greater transparency. Several governments launched independent investigations. Reform movements gained momentum. Questions once dismissed became impossible to ignore. The council survived. But its authority no longer appeared unquestionable. 1 year later, Elias Kane stood on an observation deck overlooking Earth. Blue oceans glimmered beneath the sunlight. Trade continued. New alliances flourished. Humanity had not become isolated. It had simply remained itself. A journalist beside him broke the silence. Ambassador, do you regret the decision? Kane watched the planet below. The cradle of a species that had refused to surrender its voice. A faint smile appeared. The day humanity left the council wasn't the day we chose isolation. The journalist waited. Kane looked toward the stars. Countless worlds. Countless futures. All still unwritten. It was the day we chose our own future. Beyond the glass, the stars stretched endlessly into the darkness. And for the first time in a long time, the future belonged to those willing to claim it.